to Accelerate Your Wealth, a podcast by Rebecca Robertson, founder and director of Evolution Financial Planning. We hope you enjoy the show, and please feel free to leave us a review. It really does help. Feel free to connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram, or head over to www.rebeccarobertson.co.uk or our sponsor, Evolution Financial Planning, for regulated advice on www.evolutionfinancialplanning.co.uk/podcast.
Today we're joined by Katharine. She's a consultant nurse with nearly 3 decades of working in healthcare as a senior nurse leader in women's health. Katharine remains a registered nurse and is the founder and director of Flux State Limited, supporting women to understand their bodies, know their minds, and ask for what they need to navigate menopause. She is a non-medical prescriber of hormone replacement therapy within her virtual menopause clinic and trained in cognitive behavioural therapy for those who can't or don't want to take HRT. She's also a certified coach and trainer supporting women and their organisations to enable them to remain in work whilst ensuring health and well-being and financial security in midlife and beyond. Today, we talk about money and menopause and how the menopause affects us financially and what impact that has on our money. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, the beautiful Katharine. So I've known Katharine, I don't know, it's got to be a good 5 or 6 years, I would say. And hello.
Hello.
And we've met through the One of Many community, and I've just obviously introduced you to and read out your bio so people know who you are and what you're about. But I'd love to start this conversation just by talking about your personal experience of the menopause, the big M. Now, this is something that it's getting talked about a lot more, which is fantastic. But for me, it's still a very early part of my journey because I'm 43. So on the younger side of that pre-menopause, and my experience is still that of my grandmothers who brought me up, and my mother who I was around, but I wasn't. She's in her 60s now, but I didn't live with her growing up. So it was almost something that you didn't talk about. It's like, oh, I'm having a bit of a hot flush. Just leave me to get on with it. But actually, everything else wasn't really talked about. So what's your experience and where are you at now with it?
Yeah, so I've been a women's health nurse consultant 3 decades. So I have always been immersed in women's health. And so I come at this from a clinical and personal experience. But I had fertility treatment for my son because I have endometriosis, which is an acute pain condition. And 10 years of fertility treatment or trying for a baby, lots of operations, and I have a beautiful son. So I'm very grateful for all of this technology that goes on to help us around this time. And I returned to work at 4.5 months because I had a really terrible pregnancy. So I was off for 7 months of my pregnancy with my son. And so I felt this real urge, internal, but also external, to return to work as a senior nursing leader. So I went back at 4.5 months. Looking back, I don't think that was the best of ideas, but my son really didn't sleep and had problems because he's allergic to dairy and egg. So we had quite a tough,
you've had
early years. And of course, you look at yourself and your ability to cope around this time as a new mum. I wasn't sleeping, my anxiety was through the roof, I was catastrophizing, ruminating, really tearful, utter fatigue, and wasn't sleeping, just really bad insomnia. And then as my son started to sleep, as he got to about 18 months old, I realized he was sleeping through the night, but I wasn't. And my anxiety was through the roof. It was one incident at work, which I often share, where I swore at a member of staff. This is not my normal.
You're normally so polite, and that's maybe something I would do, but maybe not something you would do. No, you're very
it really stopped me in my tracks because I said sake to them, which is where flux state comes from, because I feel I was in a state of flux at that time, and perhaps just used the wrong word that elaborated. I was utterly
inspiration for you, so it was obviously a good turning point.
It was. And so I actually resigned the very next day, threw in my resignation and just walked out. And people that I was working with said to me and said to others, where's Katharine gone? She looked like she was, really doing really well in her role. She didn't look like she was struggling. And yet I was really barely surviving. There wasn't enough energy for myself, for my son, for my relationship, let alone work. So that was a point where I just thought my mental health was really poor. I thought I was going mad, to be honest. So I went on a journey of CBT, which was really helpful, antidepressants, which I do still take to this day because my anxiety can get out of control. With all the tools I have, I've made a choice to continue to take antidepressants. And it was 3 years later, just going back into the NHS after I had some coaching through the Happy Easters with Jenny Garrett and then the One of Many. And I had my first hot flush 3 years later. And it was like a light bulb going off. I just realized, oh my goodness, here am I as a women's health nurse consultant. I didn't realize I was in the perimenopause. My colleagues certainly didn't mention to me that
How old were you when you had your son?
Yeah, so I had my son at 38. So I was 40. Yeah, I was just 40.
Is that on the earlier side of the cusp? Is that or is that about average?
Yeah, so we know that 1 in 100 women will go through the menopause under 40. So that's not small numbers.
Yeah.
We know that women tend to go through it between 45 and 51,
right?
With the average, so 45 and 55.
The actual menopause, not the premenopause.
That's the menopause, their periods will stop.
Oh, right.
And then that bit between 40 and 45 is what we call early menopause. But of course, we've got this perimenopause, which I think, to be honest, we've not really spoken about until the last 2-3 years. It's not been in our vocabulary.
No.
And actually, it's not the stopping of the periods that causes the hormone fluctuations. It's the lead up to it. Yeah. And it's the unpredictableness of it, and also how our body responds to those hormone fluctuations. So for me, it was the anxiety and the sleep that were my first symptoms. For other people, it could be hot flushes. For other people, it could be palpitations and panic attacks. There's 34 signs and symptoms of the menopause, and for each person, it will be very unique. But the challenge is that it comes before our periods stop, even before our periods become irregular. And so those symptoms can be really derailing us. And it's the thing I hear from women is, 1, why didn't I know about all these symptoms?
Yeah.
2, I thought I was going mad. And also that I was alone, that there was nobody else that was going through this. And so for me, I feel really privileged to be in a position that I can share my knowledge and experience to enable other people to join up the dots sooner, and hopefully so they don't walk out on their jobs. Because I believe that the menopause is a threat to financial security if we don't, as a society, as workplaces, as communities, as healthcare systems, support women to navigate this challenging time, which is a normal life event, but is pretty hard for, at least 25%, potentially 75% of us.
And I'm finding people that I speak to, it's not necessarily this, I can talk to you about this stuff, your women's, it's not the vaginal dryness that they're bothered by, it's not the hairy chin that really gets on their nerves, it's not the hair loss. You'd expect it to be, women, we sort of, as a generally speaking, we're very aware of our appearance, but actually those things are really a secondary to it. It's the mental health, actually, how it affects our cognitive behavior and our inability to focus. And for example, for me, everything you've just described, I also have an underactive thyroid. So when I'm different points of my hormonal period, I can have ups and downs, and I'm taking the same level of thyroxine. So there's times where the first thing that goes is actually my mental health or my energy. And when I say energy, it's not like it's not the same as not sleeping for a week. But it's similar in the sense of all of a sudden it hits you like a bus that you don't have any energy. So it's really hard for someone like myself, or those that have got thyroid issues, is because actually you don't know if the heart palpitations, the dizziness, the tiredness is actually premenopausal, or it's actually part of the thyroid condition. And then also, without getting overly personal, but I'm quite happy to share because I'm quite open, I also have a coil because my periods pre having thyroid issues, even before that, where my periods were so heavy and I was so hormonal that I almost had to have the coil put in. And I know, I had to have that estrogen added to my system to help it all calm down. So I don't have periods anyway already. And now I worry that what happens when I take that coil out at some point. One, it's really painful, and two, I've then got to try and cope with all of that again. And then, well, actually, would I have a period because I've already gone through the menopause, but I wouldn't have known it, kind of thing. And I didn't take my medication last week. I ran out, and typical style of me and most women, I was running around, looking after everybody else, and I just didn't get to the pharmacy in time. They make me go every month, even though it's a long time life condition. They won't give me batches. I have to go every month. So it's quick. Those weeks fly by before it's the actual day. And then I've run out of medication. So it meant I didn't have my medication for a week. Some people that would mean they're on the floor. For me, I can just about handle it. But more than a week, then things start to get a little bit odd. Normally vertigo, dizziness, and lack of energy. But for me, I've found in the last day or two is not so much my energy, but my motivation has really affected me. I feel like it's a dull grey Monday morning when you've just come off a really nice sunny holiday and you feel really pissed off that you're at work. It's that kind of, I'm fine, but it doesn't quite all feel right, if that makes sense. And
absolutely,
that to me is the real, not the, there are obviously lots of issues, but one of the biggest things I'm talking to friends and people is that how that then affects their job, how it affects their relationships, how it affects their motivation, their drive, their desire. So yeah, I think there's so much to it. And how can we help ourselves, or how can we get the help that we might need? Because the doctors in the NHS are not necessarily knowledgeable, willing, or able to assist.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I know you talked about your experiences being brought up by your grandmother and then your mum experiences of menopause. My mum was on HRT. She in the 90s, just when I went to university, her mental health anxiety was flawed, and then came a crisis with our belief systems about HRT not being safe, based on some research that has been completely dismissed now.
That was cancer, right? Breast cancer particularly.
Yeah, breast cancer, increased strokes and heart disease. And we now know that research that was done on older women, 70s, was high doses, and they already had some of those conditions like heart disease, high blood pressure, risk of stroke. Right. So giving high doses of synthetic HRT to a group of women who were more at risk of those conditions anyway. And we don't prescribe HRT in that way. Actually, we try and prescribe HRT before 60 because the evidence suggests we want to be treating before those risk factors. So we are prescribing differently now to we were before. So quite often women will say to me, I've got a couple of the symptoms and I've been to a GP and they say my periods are regular, or my hormone tests are all normal, therefore you're not perimenopausal.
Yes, I hear that all the time from my friends.
Yes, I do too. And so I set up Flux State, which is a community of 2,500 women.
Wow, Katharine, that's amazing. Congratulations. I remember when you first started that. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, started it with before Davina. Thank you, Davina. Is all I can say. With 80, and yes, it's increased since then because women are searching information. You know, our parents' generation may have accepted what the doctor has said, and now we are more educated. We've got more access to information. We've got, people promoting the perimenopause and the use of testosterone, for example, in HRT. My mum's generation, 30% were on HRT. If we look at before Davina effect, when I started my group, it was 11%. So we know that 25% of women are severely impacted by their symptoms. We're not even treating them, let alone the 75% of people who might be struggling with 1 or 2 symptoms.
Yeah.
It's gone up now to about 15, 16%. So we are still under treating. We know that. One of the things is the NICE guidelines are going to be reviewed. So at the end of the year, we'll have some new guidelines for GPs. And this is much needed because we've got to look at this area of what's the evidence we've got? What gaps do we have that we need to do some research so that we can really improve the women's care, because we just haven't got the evidence. That's half the problem. We also haven't got the training. And therefore, really important that we take an opportunity to get to read the evidence-based information. Yeah. So know what the signs and symptoms are, know what your top 4 symptoms are and the impact they're having on your life. Like it's impacting my relationship, my ability to parent, ability to work. I'm gone part-time, I'm off sick. These are really important. The thing is, if we go in saying, because GPs have 7 minutes, if we go in and say in tears, which I was in tears, sobbing, couldn't really get across what I was struggling with, hadn't had a hot flush, I came out with antidepressants. And that is many women's experience, because that's the thing we mention. But actually, it's really important, yes, to address that mental health is an issue. But if it is perimenopause, antidepressants are not the first line treatment. It's actually HRT, a trial. And if we talk about thyroid and menopause symptoms are so closely overlapping. It's really difficult to know what's thyroid and what's menopause. So a trial of HRT can be really helpful. So
how can we convince doctors to do that? Because some of them are just so, well, one is the cost, I imagine. And is it not that much? No. So why are they reluctant, do you think? Is it just the education piece?
It's old guidelines, lack of training. And we are 51% of the population, but you wouldn't believe it, because we don't treat women as different to men. We treat them as same, and we treat them, oh, you've got high blood pressure, oh, you've got anxiety, oh, you've got, thyroid problems. What we don't do is treat people holistically and treat, oh, look at all these things, how are they interrelated? Yeah. What would be the most helpful thing to trial? And it's that sort of building a puzzle. So persistence is really important for women. Educate yourself, advocate for yourself, read up about the risks and benefits so that you know what the real risks for yourself are. So I tend to say to women, say you've read these risks and benefits and you believe the risks, the benefits going to outweigh the risks, and ask them for their opinion, because quite often there are a lot of myths around the risks and they aren't actually based on the new types of body identical HRT we have. Whereas the synthetic we had, yes, there were more risks of clots and things like that. But that's not the case with topical HRT. So come and join a community where there is evidence-based information based on clinical. Look where your sources of information is really important. And I have a clinic as well if women are really struggling, and so I can write a letter to GPs as well. But there will be in your practice somebody who will have some level of experience with women's health, so ask who it is.
Okay.
The challenge is if there's lack of experience, they're referring you to specialist clinics in secondary care, and they are overrun. We've got the longest waiting list since COVID in women's health. 600,000 women are waiting for surgery, for example. So the longest of any speciality. So don't expect to wait. So
Can you go private if you're concerned? Like, do you have to still get a referral, or?
No, to my clinic, for example, you wouldn't need a referral. So
Okay.
I treat it holistically. So it could be that we talk about all the options and I don't prescribe at the end. We just say, actually, what about CBT? Because I'm CBT trained as well. I truly believe for anxiety, low mood, sleep issues, hot flushes, night sweats, CBT and HRT, if you can take it or you're willing, is a really good combination. It's not
Can you
just...
explain what CBT is?
Yeah, so CBT is a cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
I like to call it cognitive behavioral thinking because it's reframing our thinking around the menopause. And this is one of the things we can do in the menopause is we are so judge ourselves around our confidence, our ability to focus, our ability to remember things, that we're so harsh on ourselves that actually that stops us being able to articulate ourselves clearly or remember somebody's name. So we can reframe our thinking around symptoms and minimize their impact on the domino symptoms. So, for example, if I got a hot flush now, in the past, I might have rushed through this, tried to get offline, just like completely distracted, taking, shallow breathing, come the palpitations, I can't think of anything. They're domino symptoms. If I get a hot flush, I see it as a moment in time. Just a moment in time, and I treat myself with self-kindness. It's going to pass. Perhaps drink a cold fluid, and maybe take a layer off, maybe open the window. I've got a fan, which is somewhere on my desk here, but I could find it if I needed to. It's going to pass. It's just a moment in time, and it's a natural response.
Yeah.
What I want to do is put the pause in so that it doesn't escalate.
Yeah.
So if I can't remember something, in the past, I might have said, oh gosh, I'm so stupid. Why can't I remember that? And I'm getting agitated. I'm never going to remember it. But if I take a deep breath and say, in a moment, that's going to come back to me, but I'm just going to keep talking. Yeah. And I remember the name. So it's self-compassion, self-kindness is really important. But we know CBT has the evidence that it reduces the severity and impact of menopausal symptoms. So if you can't take HRT, you don't want to take HRT, or HRT hasn't been the elixir of life like we've been sold, then maybe it's a combination of approach. And I think midlife is really a time to look at our energy, our self-kindness, find a community that supports you so that we don't threaten our financial security. We're not walking out on our jobs. We're not walking out on our relationships, because divorce rate is high in perimenopause. The average age is 34.9 years. So bang in perimenopause. And it's women filing for divorce. And actually, I don't know if anyone comes out well of divorce. If you don't have to get divorced and you can repair your relationship, it's got to be better for your financial security. But if you're in a relationship that's harming your health and well-being, then absolutely do you want to do it from a place of empowerment. That's
totally.
really important.
They're already, most divorcee women are already, some, not all, have been in quite, even though not physically abusive, but certainly emotionally abusive relationships. Not all of them, but some of them. And unfortunately, it is a higher percentage of women being abused than it is men, unfortunately. So they're already in like a lack of confidence, the lack of knowing, the lack of what's around the corner. I even spoke to a lady yesterday who is going to be fine. Like, she's going to be getting a £1 million pension, in which she put her time in, so to speak. Some people might think, oh, that's, you just sat at home doing nothing. No, she did not. And she's going to be financially in a great place, and with help myself, we're going to put her even better place. And our conversation was so empowering, because she's like, oh, I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to I feel like you've explained it all. I feel much more confident. If you add in the menopause, just that already complicated situation, it makes you lack your confidence, you lack drive. There's so much information you have to take on board. Similar, I imagine, for people in their careers, if they're thinking about executive level and they're wanting to go to that next point. Is there a point at which, I don't know if you know much research around this, but where women are sort of achieving a certain career level pre-menopause, but they're not post-menopause, or...
That is so interesting. We know that we have 1 in 10, a million women have walked out on their jobs. Now,
Wow.
is it from a place of empowerment because they're going to be entrepreneurs and, like us, set up our own businesses? Because I definitely feel empowered now. But how I got here was not an empowered route.
No.
It was a choice.
No, mine either. I was made redundant at 14 weeks pregnant and went through a massive, I had my thyroid issue. I had what's called a thyroidectomy. I had half my thyroid removed, which was basically where they cut a 7-inch like round your neck. Yeah, so that was definitely not an empowered process.
We've turned it around, is what I like to say. And I think midlife is that time when we can turn it around and focus on what's really important to us. But so what we know is that obviously perimenopause for the majority of people will come at the peak of their career. It's just at that time when you might be stepping up to exec level or director level. And the
children would be older typically, so
possibly older, or like me, toddlers. So you're in that sandwich generation of older parents. My parents are in their 70s. My son's 11. But so we're all different what we're dealing with, and maybe some of us are caring for children as well, or young adults as well, due to their needs that they might have. So what we're finding is that, yes, 25% of women are sailing through the menopause. Lucky them, because it wasn't me. And if they are they the ones that are reaching exec level? Because it doesn't, if you think about it, what proportion are execs? It's around the 25%. It's 23%, I think. So is it that actually, if you sail through the menopause, you are just progressing and progressing and progressing? Whereas if you're struggling around this time, your self-esteem takes a knock. You maybe not going for your promotions. You might be reducing your hours. You might sit down. You might step out. And that not only has an impact on your earning ability, but on your pension.
Yeah,
you can retire, and that financial security, which, like that woman, financial security is really empowering. So don't dig your head in the sand like I would have done in the past. Look ahead. What do you want your life to be like? And if work is not working for you, because of the impact of the menopause, what support can you have? Because we know, for example, that HRT is the most effective treatment for hot flushes and night sweats. We believe that sleep is impacted by night sweats. Anxiety and sleep go together. And it could be that your night sweat wakes you up first, then comes the anxiety, and then you can't sleep. So it's the domino of effects. So people, I don't want hot, HRT, because my hot flushes aren't very bad. But the brain fog, the focus, the confidence, the palpitation, there's a whole load of others. So a trial can be really helpful. If I think about how much it costs me to keep my car on the road, I don't think twice about getting an MOT and getting new tires and keeping it ticking over. Health and well-being is really important to me, so much so that I walked out because I felt my health and well-being was under threat. But it's what you do when you are under threat, your health and well-being, is that refocusing and prioritizing your needs. What do you need to do to invest in your diet?
I was going to ask you about diet, because that diet, talking about Davina, she talks quite a lot about diet. And I've got a friend of mine who's premenopausal. She's gone to the doctor, same scenario that we've just described. Doctor says nothing wrong. But she's got I'm not sure if she's a nutritionist or something similar. And she's subscribing like supplements. Her T4 was okay, her iron was okay, but there was something else that wasn't. But so on the face of it, it looked like all her bloods were okay. And this nutritionist is sort of subscribing certain things to sort of bolster her along. Is that like, do you believe that's a short-term win? Or
you know what, if midlife is not anything but it's time to be reflective, it's reflective on how much exercise we're doing, how much we're moving, because that's going to help our bones and our hearts. It is about our diet, and is it healthy and balanced? And nothing can replace a healthy diet. If we look at processed foods that are available, and if we're working hard and we're snatching things, the sugar count in things is not going to help our focus if we're relying on caffeine and sugar. We need to fuel our brains, we need to hydrate our brains. And so yes, healthy eating is really important, but I do take supplements on top. So we know that women are quite often lacking in calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12, some key ones. So looking at how you can put more of that in your diet is really important.
Yeah.
But looking at holistically, because it doesn't, I know some people will say that you can take foods that will have sort of estrogenic properties, but you do have to take quite a lot, and it may well be that
what would that be?
Like soya milk, for example.
Right. So you definitely have to like sage. Right. It's a lot of sage and soya milk, is it?
Yeah, and red clover, there's some evidence. And they are really good for the hot flushes and night sweats. The evidence suggests that. Less good for the mental health ones.
Right.
So it might well work in the early perimenopause, and you might find as you go on, there's no right or wrong way. You can't, it's not like I'm going down the herbal route, can never take anything else. I'm going down, the CBT and I can do nothing else. For me, it's not that. It's a roundabout with lots of different options. The most important one is to do one of them.
Yeah, just find
no matter what you do, find something that works for you. And if it's not working, come back and try something else or use a combination.
So one of the statistics that you sent over to me was that if women have one symptom at 50, at 55 years old, 43% of women will have left employment and 23% will have reduced their hours. That's a massive impact on their financial security. We already have gaps in our pensions. We already have gaps in our employment due to having children more often, or looking after older elderly parents, for example, or the environments that we've been brought up in, because we've not thought that we could achieve that glass ceiling kind of situation where we're capping our income as it is, and putting in a minimum 2 or 3% each year into your pension, unfortunately, is not sufficient to live off of, depending on what lifestyle you would like in your sort of 60s and 70s, etc. But that's huge. 43% will have left employment. That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, we are living longer.
Yeah.
Life is more expensive. Some of us are taking mortgages later. We're going to be paying, we're going to have other things and responsibilities, or children at university, So the pressure on us in our 50s and 60s and 70s may well be very different to what it was for our parents' age. And we're having to work longer. But if you're working less hours, you're going to be putting less away. And so this is really important, because this is why I've got a couple of aspects of my business. One is educating the women. One is helping them get the treatment they need. So my clinic, a CBT. And the other one is educating workplaces, because it's fine if you've got a policy, but it's not fine if no one reads it. It is fine if a manager wants to talk about menopause, but all the women are embarrassed to mention the symptoms that they have. Let's, mention incontinence, for example, heavy periods. I can't be training all day without adequate breaks, because I may actually leak through my clothing. That's not easy to have a conversation with managers about, and yet many women are dealing with that. So we've got women are embarrassed, managers want to help but don't know how to help.
Sure.
They think they need to be experts and they don't. And so what I do with organizations is I go in, you help them get a policy, help them get menopause cafe so women feel comfortable talking about it, training managers to how to support their women, how to embed the policy in practice, and then also talk to organizations. Okay, what's next? Because I truly believe, we know that when women are off sick for 8 weeks or more, 20% of them will walk out or reduce their hours. So we've got this window when someone is off sick and they haven't mentioned it's perimenopause or menopause, they're gonna reduce their hours or walk out, because when they're not able to communicate what their needs are and their support.
What do employers do to help that?
So I think it is about normalizing the conversation at work, starting to talk about it. We need senior people to be talking about it as well. We need an environment where, just like mental health, if we think about pregnancy, works took a responsibility that keeping women safe during pregnancy was important, because you want them to come back.
Yeah.
Well, you want to retain your female talent around this time. You don't want to be training someone else. You don't want them walking out the door or reducing their hours. We need diversity in the exec board. And so it's offering things like some services I work with, I provide a virtual menopause service for them. So if they have women who are off sick, I offer coaching, for example, 12 weeks coaching to get them back to work. Like they might do my CBT course, or they might come to my menopause clinic. So it's like, okay, you can signpost to all the information you like, but if they then go to their GP and their GP says no,
then what's next? And that's what I hear a lot of. I mean, I think I've got friends who are sort of the more entrepreneurial side, and they will go out and find someone, because we're in that sort of, we've got to that point of our life where we know lots of people, we know how to find things, we figure stuff out. Whereas I've got friends who would go to their doctor, and their doctor is like the oracle of everything, like the buck stops there kind of thing. So when they get told no, they just think, well, I'll just have to carry on and cope. I heard someone make a interesting comment the other day. Obviously, as I work in financial services, and there was another female made a comment about there was, I think it was a workshop, or it was a podcast, or it was something was going on within financial services sort of kind of environment, talking about menopause, which that in itself is that's really unusual. And I sort of, at the time, I was hearing menopause every other day, or like every day. And I think it depends on what circles you're in, how, if you're only interested in boats, for example, all you ever going to hear about is boats. But where I have a really big circle of women in my community and also online, I hear similar things. But this particular lady sort of had a bit of a negative response to the fact, well, why are we bringing menopause? Why it's everywhere at the moment. Like, do we really need to be talking about this? And I found that a really interesting response, because she was an older lady, and I assume maybe she's part of that 25% that actually have had an okay experience. But I just found that a really interesting view or spin on it. But then when I think about it, I think there's a little bit of I don't know if indoctrination is the right word, but if you think about the medical profession in general, if you think about the testing of drugs, for example, I don't know when this stopped, and you're probably a better person to say, but for a long period of time, most drugs were actually tested on men, and they didn't even bother testing the side effects and how it affects women, although we are pretty different.
We are different, the way that our stomach, the acid in there, how our bowel moves is different, how our kidneys work, how our liver. And yet, if you opened a medical textbook, from my training, we were the same. That's it, and we know that's not the case. We process medications very differently. So research is getting better, but there's still a massive research gender gap. So women are less likely to take part of research because of their periods. Like on day 1 of their cycle, they may be very different, reacting to something on day 28. So the way that our bowel works, my bowel changes, I mean, we're talking about all sorts of things, but the way that we go, progesterone affects our bowel. It can make, just as before our period, women get loose stools, so that means the medication is going to move through our system more. So but I mean, classic example is testosterone. Testosterone at the moment is only licensed, so only prescribed on the NHS for low libido. So all the research into testosterone has been done on low libido. I'm just going to take a guess that the focus was, let's improve the sex aspect rather than all the other aspects of where testosterone can help us.
So that's one of the things that we drop, right? We drop testosterone in part of the menopause, right? So that's no one's ever tested that.
No,
that's crazy.
So basically, we know that testosterone can help. Now, this is observationally. They believe it can help our focus, our concentration. It helps us with our ratio of body to fat. It helps our metabolic rate. It helps our libido, our drive. You know, so the difference in our 20s and 30s, when we have 3 times as much testosterone to estrogen, is that I could play hard and work hard and still get up the next morning and be completely functioning and do a presentation without preparing too much for it. I certainly can't do that now. And that's because initially testosterone sort of clings on when estrogen and progesterone drops. It clings on and slowly comes down, but it will bottom out at some point. So this is why women, you know, the reason why women have higher incidence of dementia, higher incidence of cardiovascular disease, higher incidence of osteoporosis, thin bones, is because the 3 hormones are dropping.
Right. Got it. So, like, I'm not 23. I wish I was 20.
I wish.
Yeah, I'm 43 now. So, you know, the grey hair's set in, you know, hair where I don't want it, all of that kind of stuff. And I've got, you know, I'm not necessarily worried about my weight, but I'd like to get fitter for my horse riding. And I'm conscious of my bone density. I'm conscious of my skin, so I get really bad rosacea. I'm conscious of my general health. My husband's quite fit, although he eats terribly. I'm vegetarian. He's not. We're like literally poles apart. He'd have steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I wouldn't. I never touched it. But I'm very conscious that he works out like sometimes once or twice a day. He's super fit. You know, I sort of want to keep up with him from a fitness perspective, although I'm way behind already. And I just feel like there's this, you know, so much pressure on women. You know, I've got to run my business, I'm going to grow it. You know, there's this pressure of, you know, developing and, you know, being ambitious, which I've sort of lost a bit of, you know, the will for these days, because I've done a lot of work on myself. I'm not really coming from an ego place anymore. I'm sort of coming at, what do I want to do? What impact do I want to have? But then we've also got, you know, I've got children, I've got animals. I'm a bit crazy with my animals and things. And people wonder how I get so much done. But I sort of feel like I want to work out more. I want to eat more healthily. There's so much more that I want to do for myself, but I don't want to use time as an, because that's a massive excuse. Like, I haven't got the time. I could get up an hour earlier. I could organize my day that I, you know, booked a yoga session and block my calendar out like that. But it's almost like I haven't got the headspace or the will in some way to be able to go. It just feels so overwhelming, all of it. You know, you've got to eat healthy, you've got to work out, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to have your finances in order. It just becomes too much. So for those women who are, you know, probably like myself, but, you know, in a sort of situation where, you know, I do like my job, you know, so I've got that going for me, or they're sort of feeling that they want to get out of what they're doing, or they're just feeling generally quite overwhelmed with the information. Is there like a top sort of tip that you would give them to start, just to start? Because sometimes there's a long list of things and there's so much you can do, right? Is there sort of one quick win that you would suggest?
We do this thing where when we, like, say we make a bad choice, or not a bad choice, but we, you know, eat a cake or a donut, it's like, oh, we've written it off. This whole week is written off, so I might as well just drink now. I might as well just eat what I want. Every moment of time is a new time to make a different choice. I will enjoy a donut. There's no doubt about it, but I will also move more. So for me, in our Flux State community, we talk about moving more. So World Menopause Day is the 18th of October. And so I'm talking to everyone about this menopause countdown. You know, now, today, you can do something. This minute, we can do something for our health and well-being. If you're in an organization, you can do something to support women in your organization. So for me, it's like moving more. Don't beat yourself up about the choices you make. Enjoy food. Try and think about your meals so that you've got all your food groups in there. So one of the hardest things for women is eating enough protein, particularly if they're vegetarian.
Yeah.
So looking at your protein, because we can rely on carbs for our energy.
Protein shakes I could do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Increase the amount of protein you're having in your diet will help.
I need my husband. It's fine. I've got loads in the house.
Brilliant. So what women put on weight around this time, one, because their testosterone drops and their metabolic rate drops, but also because their cortisol levels are high. So one of the kindest things you can do is build in more mindfulness or more moments to pause and focus on your breathing. So even if you don't move more, just calm that body, because you will be burning adrenaline when your cortisol is high, and then you will be storing fat. So actually, one of the kindest things we can do, don't beat ourselves up, move more when you can, focus on your breathing, self-kindness, self-compassion.
Love it. I've been I've downloaded Davina's book, but I've also been listening to Steve Bartlett's podcast, and he's had some super interesting people on recently. One was called The Glucose Goddess. I don't know if you've heard of that. And she talks about how she's a biochemist, so it's all very technical, but it's sort of taking what you eat to another level. So anyone that's listening, if you're super interested in like more what you're eating and you want to take it to another level, then I would definitely go and suggest you check that out. I found the podcast really interesting. I have downloaded her first book is more on like the biochemistry, and her second book is more like suggestions of things that you can do with recipes and stuff. So like, you can go as far as you like with it. But I just found it really interesting, like eat vinegar. Don't have a sweet breakfast because of the sugar hit later on in the day. Only have a savory breakfast. Eat your have a veggie starter for every meal. So lots of greens before your meal. And what was the other one? Move more. Go for exercise after 30-minute exercise after you've eaten.
And we often think about moving, exercise, and we're like, oh, I've got to exercise, and it's got to be like, I've got to be on my bike for like an hour, and I've got to be running. And that doesn't always work so well, because it puts us in a high cortisol state. So it actually isn't fat burning. Actually, the walking more, just a little bit out of breath, short reps of using weights is really important for our bones, really important for our muscles around our bones, and really important.
Don't talk to me about my chicken arms. they used to be muscly, and I'm really strong because of the horses, but yeah, it's like I've got chicken fillets attached to the. Let me ask you a question, and then I'll let you go. What is your opinion now on collagen?
I am not a nutritionist. I think read into the company that you're using. I think that's really important, because we don't always process all types of collagen that is on the market. What's the benefit? How is it getting into our body? Is really important. I think about if you are a vegetarian, it may be more difficult, but if you're not a vegetarian, looking at bone broths and things like that in your diet gives you collagen.
That just makes me feel like
of course it does, and I'm sorry, but
it's somebody for some people.
Yeah, for some people it will be, and for others it will just be a no. But I'm not an expert on it, but maybe I'm going to regret that. I don't know. With years,
I've just seen so many women having Botox. Like everybody's even having lip fillers or Botox, and I worry. I'm not judging them at all. Like each their own. Like I don't know people's life backgrounds. Everyone makes their own choices. But I just worry for the amount of women that are having it now. And also I worry for myself. So when I'm 50, I look probably 60 compared to my peers who are having Botox. There's that peer pressure that we must go and get Botox because now I look 20 years older than everybody else.
I think this is the time. I'm not saying that I'm going to go grey and I'm just going to let my skin go, because I want to nurture my body. I want to put some nice cream on my face, and I want to put some body oils on, and I want to have my hair done nicely. But I think we need to reframe menopause. This is our opportunity to be more of ourselves. And I'm 50 next year. Look, I have lots of laughter lines, and I have lots of lines here. It's because I've laughed a lot and I've had a lot of fun.
You look amazing.
Thank you. Well, so actually, but if I'm frowning and stressed, I remember there was a stage where I was really stressed at work, and I just had these terrible frown lines. And actually, the more I've done sort of just calming my nervous system, breathing, being a bit kinder to myself, rather than rubbing on my cream, just sort of like taking some time to nurture this beautiful body that we have, this is a time to reframe. Actually, aging gracefully for me is really important. Not doing anything that's going to harm my body. And I'm not saying Botox is, but what we do know is we're stretching the layer between your skin and your muscles. So actually you need to keep having it done. So, if you're going to do it, just remember you've got to keep it up. So for me, it's not something I who knows? 50 next year, I might change my mind. But at the moment, I'm going to age gracefully.
That's my attempt. I wait and see what happens. Never say never, right? Now, I've really enjoyed our chat today. Thank you for being so open and honest, and I hope it's helped lots of women, but even if it's one person, to have a different conversation with their family, to recognize how they're feeling, to go to their doctor, to think about whether it's the job that they want to change, or actually how it's the menopause or the premenopause has been affecting them personally in their life or their finances. I do think it's really relevant, and it is a threat to women's financial security long term. Definitely, from the statistics you've shared with me today, it's really quite scary. So how can people connect with you? Do they go to your website? I imagine it's the fluxstate.co.uk. Is that right?
Yeah, fluxstate.co.uk. That's perfect. And then reach out and join my community if you'd like, where we share an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we share reliable sources of information. So if you go onto Facebook, you type in Flux State, all one word, menopause, it comes up.
That's a free community, is it?
Community, yeah,
easy. That's a great place to start. I think I'm in there myself, actually, so maybe I should go in there and check out some of the ladies' stories and have a little listen.
Absolutely. I think people who come into the community, they realize they're not alone, and when we're not alone, it empowers us to learn from somebody else's experience and how they managed to get the help they needed to navigate the menopause. So you're not alone.
Definitely not. Thanks again for coming today and talking to me, Katharine. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Accelerate Your Wealth. For further help or to connect with Rebecca directly, please head over to the website www.rebeccarobertson.co.uk, where you can find further information on our planner, book, and how to further maximise your wealth. Our sponsor, Evolution Financial Planning, for regulated advice on pensions, investments, mortgages, insurances on www.evolutionfinancialplanning.co.uk/podcast.